Just like consequentialism, deontology has its problems. It has its objections and worries. Now, a lot of them can be like really, really complex and kind of tricky to deal with. For example, like what happens when two moral duties that we have conflict with one another and we can't fulfill both of them? What are we supposed to do in a moral dilemma like this? What happens if I've got an inclination to help somebody because I just like helping people, but also I recognize that I've got a moral duty to do so. Does my maxim have moral worth in a case like that? These are tricky, they're really interesting, but we're just going to focus on two objections, including the one that we started this module with. So let's get into it. One objection we have already seen and we've already kind of talked about a little bit. This is the idea of what we might call one-off acts. This is when, a maxim is just like so specific. It's under such like really particular circumstances that even when we generalize it, it's just not going to be all that widely applicable. This is not my case. I'm pretty sure this comes from Christine Korsgaard. Imagine like a new mother who is trying to get sleep and her baby is like crying all the time. And so she's like, well, in order to get some sleep, I'm just going to kill my kid. Like, that seems pretty heinous, but like, let's try to generalize that maxim. Okay, so, kill any infant that cries more than like 2 hours a night or something like that. If that's the generalized form of the maxim, what you're going to find is that there are going to be plenty of infants that, still survive. It's not as if like the human population is going to disappear. In fact, maybe, through this would be artificial selection, I guess, but, maybe we just end up with babies that just don't cry that much. That would be kind of nice. So this maxim does seem universalizable. Like, so does the maxim that we had where we, go beat somebody up out of revenge. And perhaps the humanity formulation can handle cases like this. It seems like it's got at least something to say about both of these cases. But there is going to be a little bit of a tension here, and it's something worth thinking about, right? If these different formulations of the categorical imperative are supposed to be equivalent, like, what's going on here? What's the story? What's the deal? Why are they getting different results? But let's go back to our Nazi question that we opened this module with. Remember, you are protecting a family of Jewish people in your attic, and an SS officer comes to the door like, do you have any Jewish people in your house? According to Kant, you cannot lie. Right? Lying is, it's similar to, not similar to, it's structurally identical to like making a lying promise in this kind of case. And so it looks like a pretty clean cut and dry, you cannot lie. Not even in this situation. So what, does Kant just like get this case wrong? It's not obvious to me that he does, and it's not obvious to a lot of people that he gets this case wrong. For starters, you don't have to be like, oh yes, Mr. Nazi, I do have some Jewish people, and come on in, I'll get you some tea while I go get them for you. Like, no, tell him to fuck off. You can tell a Nazi to fuck off. Like, that's the one time you can do that, right? You could be like, yeah, I do have them. Like, what are you going to do about it? You can fight back. You can be like, oh gosh, hiding Jewish people is a very serious crime. I would have to be very brave to do something like that. There's all sorts of stuff you can do besides just like inviting him in and like leading him to these people that you're trying to protect. It's also worth noting here, this is the third point, but if these people that I'm protecting, if they know like what I can and cannot do, they can sort of strategically plan and like think about like, well, here's our options, right? Like, we know for a fact that like he cannot lie, so maybe we'll go and sneak out the back. Whereas, if I did decide to lie and maybe the Nazi believed me and he's like, okay, well, thank you, and he leaves, he's going to run into this family trying to, escape. And that's like kind of all my fault. But here's sort of the kicker, I think, for this one, is if this is such an obvious must-lie situation, why would the Nazi believe you to begin with? This just doesn't seem like a very rational course of action anyway. So, it doesn't seem obvious that Kant has got this case wrong, right? It's not going to be a practical way of getting what you want. You do not have to like hold this Nazi's hand and take him to these people you're trying to protect. And, these people can kind of plan around what I can and cannot do. So, is it a worry? I don't know. I mean, it's a little strange, but like, it's not obviously a bad result. So let's just kind of unpack everything that we've talked about and make sure that everything is brought together nice and cleanly. So here are the 3 parts of an ethical theory again. Remember, we've got the goodwill thesis. This is what we kind of started things off with. This is that commitment, that, conviction to do the right thing because it's the right thing. And this is going to have, moral worth, like all the time. This is how we get this distinction between actions done from duty and actions done in accordance with duty, right? Both our shopkeepers are giving the correct change to their customers, but only one of them is doing something that has moral worth, right? So we're not going to say that like, oh, one of them is doing the wrong thing. No, they're doing the morally correct thing. It just lacks moral worth. That is not something a consequentialist could say. If you are doing the morally correct thing on a consequentialist view, you are by definition, like bringing about something of value. Your actions by definition have moral worth. So, we also have a criterion of right. The right act is the one that upholds the moral law. And then what is the moral law? That's where the categorical imperative comes in. That's how we figure out what the moral law is. That's our decision procedure. This is where the universal law formulation comes in. Try to universalize your maxim and see if it results in a contradiction. Or the humanity formulation. Does your maxim use someone as a mere means, which means using someone as a means like without their consent. So that's the full picture. That's how everything kind of comes together. Remember, for deontology, we are not worried about the outcome of something. I mentioned this in the last video. Like, it's totally fine if you wanted to be a consequentialist and think about like, what would the consequences be if everybody did that? So kind of have like a universalizability sort of decision procedure, but you'd still be a consequentialist. You would not be a deontologist. Again, we're going to have morality that is grounded purely in reason. We did not have to go out and investigate the way the world is or potential, effects that our actions or maxims might have on people. We've got perfect versus imperfect duties. Remember, perfect duties are like duties that we have to not do stuff. And imperfect duties are duties that we have to do stuff. And when they are in conflict, and only when they are in conflict, can imperfect duties sometimes be violated. Even if you don't like this view, and like, that's totally understandable. It's complicated. It's difficult to sort of get your head around. But if you just have like the inclination that like, gosh, sometimes there are things that you can do that are wrong, even if they don't harm anybody, even if there aren't any, potential negative outcomes, like it just seems like it's wrong. Like it's just inherently not okay. If you have that gut intuition, then you might be a deontologist of some kind of flavor. at the very least, it's a beautiful idea to be able to derive morality just from like thinking about whether or not your maxim contains a contradiction. That's such a cool idea. But that'll do it for this module. Please let me know if you have any questions, and we will in the next one start talking about our third and final sort of big ethical theory. I'll see you then.